Morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. Lovely to see you all on this bright and sunny morning. Well, it is in Rochester in Kent anyway, which makes a lovely change. It's great to see you all. And without further ado, I shall hand you over to the chairman of the membership committee, Sharon Constanzen, who's done some wonderful work on this. And I hope you have a fantastic morning's presentation.
Quickly, can everyone go onto mute if you haven't already? Looks pretty much that you all have. Thank you. The Q&A, if you guys would like to, please drop comments, questions, insights into the chat facility. We will have the format of the morning, because this is a roundtable breakfast, is I'll give some insights on the topic. We will then have a conversation between Rob Ford and myself, and I'll give you some updates on that. And then we will go into a Q&A function where we'll pick up stuff that's in the chat, but equally, if we have the time, we will give participants the opportunity to ask the question themselves. And you can ask either of Rob or myself. So yes, I'm chairman of the membership committee, and we are working on increasing the membership of the Worshipful Company. That is our ultimate purpose and outcome. The effort we're putting in to achieve that is to provide a different, mixed and varied content to members and potential members. Now, at the moment, we're doing this as a freebie to everybody. But in due course, these kind of events will have a very small fee for non-members. I'm not quite sure when that will happen, but we will go with the flow of the way the market is working. But at the moment, it's great that I see a few of you have taken advantage of joining us who are not members and can understand some of the value the membership of a Worshipful Company will give you, and happy to answer any questions on those. I might defer them to the master present or the clerk present. But we are in a position, we've got a good number of our team here who can answer those questions more effectively than I can. So what I'm going to do now is go through a short presentation that will allow us to have an understanding of another kind of framework to review people that are in a director position in a group and see whether there are gaps, overlaps, clashes, in personality types, behavior types, capability types. And the quotients that I have come up with is the things that we see in the boardroom, that if these were present, you would, and people were mindful of them, that they would have an improved engagement with each other, their decision making, and their ultimate outcome. I'm now going to share my screen, and Clark, could I please have access? Work with this. Right, so the idea is to pass on some knowledge, come up with some innovative thoughts, brainstorm some ideas together. Now, Robin and I both do a lot of consulting work in this space, working with local and international companies. So there's a wealth of knowledge that we have within this. Now, from time to time, we will bring in an external speaker. Time to time will be one of us or the other, or like we're going to do today, which is a tandem approach to this, so that we can get across in the easiest manner the largest amount of information for you. Can I just have the heads up, thumbs up, that we have got a visual on your side of my presentation? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Right, what we're going to be talking about is the quotients. So the quotients are the things that make us up. It's a bit like our jizz. So it is the stuff that's within our DNA. There are certain aspects of these that can be learned experiences, where you can make an effort to work at improving certain things. Now, some of these you cannot change completely. You are what you are. But there are things that you can do to be better at most of these quotients. I met a CEO of a company who'd come up through the McKinsey world. Some of you might have heard the story. And he is very American in style. And you know that sort of look like Donald Trump had, with sort of orange skin. He always looked like he had makeup on. He always looked so stiff. And he looked like a sort of a puppet. And he used to always say the right things, but none of it showed on his face. It showed in his words, but not in his tone. And he'd been taught EQ and how to ask questions and how to engage. He had no clue. It wasn't in his DNA. And he was just doing the right thing. So I'm mindful of saying to all of you, we're going to learn about a whole bunch of quotients, but you are able to work within what is your DNA and what is authentic. So at the end of this, you must still be you, whatever you are learning today. So Kakavasi started this about 5-6 years ago, and he talked about the 5 quotients that are needed for a leader to be able to be effective and to deliver as a leader. So the first one we all know about is IQ. How much, where's our capability in our mental capacity? What is our technical ability? What is our logic ability? What is our mathematical ability? What is our creative ability? You know, some people say, I just can't do music, I can't sing, I can't do numbers, I'm lost in numbers, that's all I can do. So you have all these different people saying what is the things that they can and can't do, or comfortable with or not comfortable with. And this is the one that gets tested and apparently is something that stays with you. It's not something that you can change. Now, obviously, if you are working in a specific area, you've now specialized as a company secretary, and you know that there's certain things that need to be done every single month on the 3rd day or whatever it is, you will do those things much quicker, much more effectively than when you first started. It hasn't changed your cognitive ability, but it's changed your application to something that you are able to do. So we mustn't get that part of it confused. So your cognitive intelligence is something you have and something you are deemed and focused where your capabilities sit. EQ, emotional intelligence, also known as social intelligence, also known as your communication competency. EQ is something that you can work at improving. This is your ability to communicate, to listen, to solve issues, to engage with other people, to show empathy, to ask questions, to facilitate, to put oil on troubled waters. This is the part of the company secretary that delivers your trusted guardian of the secrets, is the person that people respect and will share their deepest worries, knowing that it won't go any further than the company secretary if it shouldn't. And it's the ability to say the right things, do the right things, engage with people in a very productive manner so that you get the best out of the other individual at all times. Now, this is where the CEO was trying to operate, was in this EQ space, where he'd walk up to you and almost stand in your shoes with you, then ask you, how's your family? And he knows he has to ask about the family. He knows he has to engage with you, but just doesn't know how to do it. It's like teaching a child. It's like a 4-year-old trying to be taught how to do it. And it's actually, it's strange when you look at it. I had a gentleman who came through the MBA with me, and he was Russian. And he also had the ability to manage to put his feet between yours when he needed to talk to you. So he was literally up here against your nose. And here you've got a guy who's American doing it. So it's actually quite interesting. So our emotional intelligence is something we can work on. And we always talk about having a balanced IQ and EQ. Now, we are not all perfectly good at EQ, perfectly good at IQ. But what you're looking for on a board is trying to balance these two so that you are getting the best outcome of cognitive and communicative activities. Because if you've got a good communicative balance in the boardroom, it will allow for the right kind of conversations to occur. And that is important, where you don't have the circumstance where somebody tells people what's going on rather than sharing information, for example. Moral skills. This is the, where do you draw the line? What is right by your moral standards? What do you think is right for the company? Where do you look forward to? So where do things fit in the right and wrong box? Now, we all hopefully have a good moral balance, but some will be more morally focused than other people might be. Some will be, especially now that you've got the climate change and the green agenda that is taking hand quite successfully thanks to the COVID environment and the focus we've had on it over decades, really, but in the last 5 years and particularly in the last 2 years. And where does that fit with yourself? Now, some people are going to be far further up the ESG scale than other people might be up around people's behavior or language, or what are the things that you are comfortable with? And if you think about our magazine Integrity, that really is what it's all about. Integrity, authenticity, and knowing, having the right balance between what's right and wrong. Now, murderers might think they're doing the right thing, but by society, that is not right and wrong. So it's also not only where your own moral skills are, it is that where society is that you're operating in this world. Political acumen, this is not your ability to be the Prime Minister. This is your ability to get to the CEO without treading on everyone's head and killing them on the way. So how do you get your way, or how do you engage with others? How do you become part of the team? How do you absorb? How does that company operate? What is the jizz in the way people behave in this organization? And therefore, how can I work with this team to get the best outcome out of the conversations I'm having, being mindful of others, listening to them? So if you combine your emotional and your political, you can actually go miles as a leader if you are able to combine these two in the way you work with other people. His fifth one was resilience. I think we've all been taught a lot of resilience in the last year, and resilience is absolutely critical to be able to stay in roles, jobs, situations that are not comfortable. Now, we know that our jobs are not always perfect, they're not always right, they're not always the way you want them. And you have to survive the left hooks, you have to survive the unknown unknowns, you've got to survive other people's complexities, and you need to learn. Resilience is about growing from your learning. Some people have got a DNA of better resilience than others. Others don't have a very strong resilient quotient. Now, if you look at people who are always anxious, or are always having a panic over things, or always worrying, big worriers of this world. Listening to a presentation by a lady who used to work with Virgin. What's the guy's name from Virgin? I've got a blank on his name. I'll get it any moment.
Richard Branson.
That's it, thank you. Knew somebody would help me out of that embarrassing situation. Could see his face and the photograph that she showed. And in her mid-30s, she was a rising executive, working 24/7, 4 continents a day kind of thing, flying around with Virgin as a brand ambassador and helping the growth and the reputation and the management of the organization. And she was getting onto stage to give a presentation and hit the wall of breakdown. And she had a complete and utter meltdown. She's never gone back into that job. She doesn't have a strong resilience quotient. She knows she doesn't have it. She could see the triggers when they're coming and has now learned what she's better at doing because she doesn't have the resilience. Now that is emotional intelligence to recognize what you don't have. Resilience comes with experience, and it comes with time, and it comes with learned picking yourself up, putting it all back together again, and getting the next layer of the work done. So resilience is a company secretary's absolute requirement. If you don't have resilience, find another job. It really, really is important. But if you look at it from a director's point of view, directors need to have resilience as well. You think of how many times you're in a boardroom, you have an idea, you think it's perfect. Everyone else has different ideas. Execs aren't listening. The chairman's not chairing the meeting properly. Nobody's getting the correct airtime. And all you want to do is just shout, scream, give up, run away, whatever the fight and flight emotion you might have. But the resilience is working with that team and bringing people around. Henry Ford did that in 12 Angry Men, where he took a jury that was 11-1 guilty to 12 not guilty by being resilient in the conversations and understanding how people needed to be taken on the journey to get to the right outcome, because people do it differently. But resilience is really a critical element. And I think COVID has given us all an opportunity to look at resilience. And it's our own resilience to difficult circumstances, our own resilience to a threatening environment that's not going away. And I think that has taught a lot of us something we didn't have a year ago. We didn't need it, now we have it. So all these quotients can be nurtured, and IQ in a focused space, you can develop IQ. If you look at somebody who's learning to type, they can't do it, suddenly they do. That's not IQ, but it's applying the IQ. You can then become far better in your external environment. So the next stage I wanted to look at, I thought, I keep talking to directors and I keep seeing other things that are not fitting into this leadership mix that I've just been talking about. So I sat down one day and said, what's missing? Let me think about it. And I put these now into capability. So if Kakabasi is talking about leadership, I'm talking about capability. And the two belong together in all of us. So the first one that is actually quite a well-known quotient, this one, is cultural quotient. How do we culturally adapt in a foreign environment, dealing with people of different ethnicities, of different cultural backgrounds? And how can we seamlessly do the right thing in the company of those people? In other words, we absorb and understand other cultures that are different to our own and don't fight it. We work positively with it. And this is the cultural quotient that is so important when you've got global companies and you've got Japanese directors, you've got German directors, you've got Dutch directors. The evaluation I'm working on at the moment is a Dutch guy. And they all, they prickle at him because he's Dutch. He comes out, calls a spade a shovel. He's very frank, he's very forthright. Yet he's extremely dapper and polite. But there's no dancing around the handbags in their culture. In English, we so politely say there's no problem. Meantime, we are furious. There damn well is a problem. But we'll dance around the handbags and hope it all goes away. Other cultures don't do that. Can't understand why you said yes, but it's actually no. So that cultural quotient is really, really important. And inside cultural quotient is language. And the funny one I always like to share is in Scotland, just now means I will do it immediately. So I'm going to check you into the hotel room just now. I stood there as a South African looking at this woman thinking, so how long are you going to leave me standing here? Because just now in South Africa means anything, but not now. So I'm sitting there thinking, what did she just say to me? So I said, well, when? No, I'm doing it. I thought, okay, all right, I've obviously missed something in that. So it's one of those things is actually quietly, instead of getting cross with her, I fortunately had the common sense to wait until I had more information that I could distill and determine the cultural differences between us. And in that case, that was language. The appetite quotient, it's all come up, but anyway, don't worry. Appetite quotient is where some of us have the ability to adopt change. We have the ability to transform. We have ability to learn a new language. We have the ability to assess risk, to accept risk, to be innovative and stretch the borders of whatever it is we work in. It could be creation, it could be creating the accounts, who knows. And whoever's got their mic, David, could you just put your mic on mute, please? Thank you. So that appetite, how open are you to an environment that is different, that is challenging, puts you outside your comfort zone, is basically what we're talking about. And some people have a zero appetite for being put outside their comfort zone. And there's a person that I deal with quite regularly that gets into a complete flap if something is ever so slightly out of her comfort zone and it's something that she's unfamiliar with. And you know it immediately because the pitch of her voice just goes off the scale. And you think, okay, the appetite quotient has blown the box. It's out the box, Jeannie's gone, and we need to now contain this lady is now in a very uncomfortable place because she doesn't have in her DNA the appetite for this circumstance that we're now in, whatever it might be we're talking about. And then yet you take others, entrepreneurs are typically falling into this category where they'll take all sorts of risks, won't even assess them. They'll just, based on instinct, they will just do things. So that is your appetite quotient for also the ability to find solutions. The biggest area we will see it in our our company secretarial role and in our board role is risk appetite is the most typical one that we are connected to. But it will be the appetite to set a stretch strategy, the appetite to do strategic conversations. You know how many people do not have the strategic conversation appetite? They just don't know how to do it. The other one that I think is really critical today, and in what format you learn it, adapt it, apply it, and there's not telling you that all of us have to become IT gurus, is the digital quotient. Can I work with current technology, hardware, apps, interconnectivity, Zoom? Everybody has become more digitally quotient positive in the last year than they ever were before because they've had to. So that gives you an idea of we can learn this stuff. It's not that we can't. My aunt, who is 94 and has avoided COVID so far, touch wood quickly, is so proficient on her iPad. Absolutely, she connects with the world. She's not alone. She's out there on her iPad. Another person I know, similar age, doesn't even want a mobile phone. They've got a phone in the house. That's fine. I'll use it. I don't need this other instrument at all. So we all have different digital quotients, whether we are 2 years old, 50 years old, or going on 100. And it's working, being able to be comfortable and adept at what digital quotient is available to us at the moment. Strategic quotient, that's coming back to the strategy part, strategy piece very directly. And to be a good board director, you need to be able to have a strong bucket full of strategic thinking. Otherwise, the board gets down into the weeds, we get lost in operational conversations, and we never actually get as a board to do our job. A company secretary who has got a strategic thinking mind is the best asset to any chairman they could ever wish for. That puts them into such a strong point to support keeping the agenda, the board conversation, the chairman's mind, the one who wants to go down in the weeds, keeping them up at that strategic level. This is really an important place for a board to stay, because if they're not up there, they are going to be wasting a lot of time doing the executive's job, micromanaging, shadowing, all these kind of things. That is not what we've created the unitary board system for. The other one, last one I want to cover, is transformation quotient. This is where I see so many directors, so many IT people, so many HR people many company secretaries who just have done it this way all their lives. And why, if it was good enough for yesterday and 50 years ago, why is it not good enough now? Why do I have to change? Yeah, what's changing around me? Really? Are things changing? Why are they changing? And people get very uncomfortable because they have their place. And an example of a board that just was putting this transformation quotient into a little matchbox. That was about as big as the transformation content was going on. And being respectful of age, they had a lady who was running IT for a financial services firm, regulated by both the PRA and the FCA. She had run that role for 33 years, and she had not been on a single external training course from the organization in 33 years. She didn't look outside the box. She was running the same technology and the same stuff, other than minor tweaks here and there. This project that she was running was 33 years old and had no appetite to make it any different whatsoever. So the transformation quotient that therefore existed in the management of this organization was extremely low, because every time they tried to engineer, strategically discuss, and move forward, they had this absolute cement concrete block that was holding them back. It was never going to let them loose. The only way they were going to get loose was to retire the individual or put somebody above them and keep the legacy knowledge. There was a huge amount of legacy knowledge. Very valuable, because everything's going to crash around them. You know, as you start transformation, you know how everything just starts like dominoes. They're just all going to fall over. So the other big transformation quotient area that we're dealing with in business at the moment is that of cultural transformation. Are we looking at things that are more modernly important? ESG, climate change, green agenda. Are we looking at stakeholders first? Are we considering the customer first? Are we putting the planet before we're putting profit? Where are we putting our people and our internal stakeholders? All that cultural stuff. We can't be bullies in our environment. I did a talk last night for a group of women in business from London Business School. And I traced through some of the things that had been challenges for me as a woman in business. And you realize when you actually put it all together, what a bullying culture I've come from. You know, we've been bullied like you can't believe. And some of the older people today will recognize things that are no longer PC and acceptable in business or in our environments were then. So some organizations are having to go through degrees of culture change, often supported by a transition of digital change as well. And if people don't have the appetite for transformation and can't cope with this degree of change, get completely unsettled, dig in their heels, and become completely stubborn and obstructive, which is not very helpful. So those are the bits I wanted to cover, which takes us through the 10 components that make up a very balanced adult professional in business, whether you are a company secretary, a chairman, or a non-executive director. And it's how do you now build the balance between all of these? It's always nice to look at things in pictures, because when you look at them in pictures, they're much easier to understand. So we put together a model, because that's what students love, textbooks love, but it does actually, facetiously, it does help you to remember how to put those 10 together. So I've divided the 10 up into 4 quadrants. We always have 4 quadrants. All models seem to be 4 quadrants. When they're 3, we get confused. So we've put Kakabatsi's 5 of them at the top, which are the leadership ones. But I separated them into left-hand side being the hard skills and the right-hand side being the soft skills. So these are the ones that we use to engage, and the other ones are knowledge and our content. And then I took the 5 that I've added, split them equally, and now we've got the capabilities split between hard capabilities and the softer capabilities. So if we were now trying to map an individual well, how would we now use this information? And we can go back to some questions on the actual model itself and the content in a moment. I want to get to the conversation side of our engagement, which we're almost at. So how can we improve our quotient as a company secretary or as a director, or how can you support your chairman to be a better chairman, taking into account these skills? So the first thing is you. Look inside, look at yourself, use the mirror. That's what it's there for. Look in the mirror and honestly assess yourself on these 10 quotients. Where do you think you fit? Where do you think you should be? And how are you going to address the gap? How are you going to learn to be better at the other ones? That exercise has got two benefits. One is I've just learned about myself. But the other benefit is in doing that, that has given me a skill to rate those I'm engaging with on the same set of scales I've just looked at. So that now gives me a map. I can now map the two of us together. And therefore, because I'm a company secretary and I have lots of EQ, I can work out how to get the best out of this other individual because I've worked out where their strengths are. So if their strengths are in being highly political, I can now work that conversation that I trigger those political responses in that person's conversation, psyche, and get them to think it's their idea. Brilliantly, I've achieved my outcome. I've worked out which quotient they own and they're strongest at. So what I did then is saying, okay, this is all nice and theoretical. This is stuff you teach in ICSA's Boardroom Dynamics. Oh, that's great. But actually, how am I, as a WCCSA member, going to apply this in my environment, whether I'm retired or whether I'm in business? This is all useful stuff because it's about who we are and how people see us and how we engage with them. So the next exercise I did was just to plot a finance director that I worked with a year ago. And I said, okay, I know you, I've worked with you, I've spent 3 months with you in the whole board evaluation space. I'm now going to plot his 10 quotients and then plot those against a non-executive director in the same firm and say, how do these two compare? So it was a SID and the finance director in one organization. And I plotted them against each other. And you can see why they don't always get on. You can see now where there's massive gaps and where there are some commonalities. So if you look at the area, I would now, as a company secretary working with these two, or as one of these individuals, they sound a SID, what would I do? First thing I'd look at is the area of commonality. We've both got a strong moral quotient. You can work with anybody who's got a strong moral quotient and work out the rest of them. So you'd always be respecting their moral standards in all your conversation, ensuring nothing you do is going to conflict with that and put their back up very quickly. The other aspect that you have in common is intelligence. So treat them as an equal, treat them as a peer, treat them in the way you would like to be treated yourself. Show that you respect for their intelligence. Call on their intelligence, ask for help, ask them to engage their intelligence, tell us, share with us, whatever it is, bring them in through their intelligence and their moral quotient. And then start looking at areas where you have a completely different areas. You can see this individual is quite low on resilience, is quite low on cultural areas, very low on strategic. So now we're sitting in the board meeting, I'm SID. I know my finance director's low on strategy. Just doesn't get it. I do numbers. I don't do this blue skies thinking. This makes me very uncomfortable, makes me very irritable. So it's working out a role in that strategic process that would suit the finance director. Instead of including him in just all the blue skies thinking, work on subgroups to do some of the work. And don't include that one in that subgroup, include him in another. Because this is not where he's going to give value. He's going to just, he's going to clash. And we don't want that to happen. So does that give you some kind of an idea of how you would take these 10 measurements and put them to good use, whether it be inside your family or whether it's inside the boardroom or in your own team. It works as soon as there's another person you are working with. Work out where you're common, work out where they are strong, and the rest with your EQ you can make happen. Now, I'm not going to pick up any of the questions yet. I think, Rob, if you'd like to sort of come into the conversation, we've got 20 minutes of a couple of things that we can just share and talk about that are related to the search. We can bring in the insights of an additional person that you haven't heard it only from me. So it's bringing in, and Rob is on the membership committee, thank goodness. He's the one who reminds me if I haven't done things because I've been busy. So he's my conscience. So I know he is a very focused individual, very structured individual, and organizes a very good diary and will do things in time. I'll do it just in time. Why waste time doing it 3 times longer over a period of time? I can do it at the last minute. Drives people mad. At least I know myself. So it's how do we work differently together. So just looking at that, one of the things I wanted just to talk about is from a leadership point of view. If you think, Rob, of a chairman that you know in some of the work that you've done, how would they benefit from taking Kakabatsi's 5 cues of leadership and turning that into something that is valuable for that individual now within their new board environment that they've just joined?
I think that's a good question. A number of chairmen that I've worked with have an understanding of many of the areas. I would say chairmen more than CEOs are actually more focused towards some of the EQ side of things, as well as the RQ, the resilience side of things. How they would focus the board would be to get people to understand that they can't be strong in all of the areas or highly strong. They can be balanced. If you look at your map that you put up with the 2 likely board characters of the strong Ned and the finance director, these are obviously specific to these particular individuals. But if you have an understanding of where people are, at least on a broad sense, you at least understand the approaches that are the best way to get the best from those individuals. And I think it's the job of the chairman or chairwoman to ensure that the board is effective as a body, not just as individuals. In the same way that you would have a sporting team, you don't want to just bring the best individuals together, but they don't play together as a team. The chair's job is to try and bring those characters, the warts and all, and try and get the best from that group of people and motivate them to work collaboratively so that the actual decisions and the dynamics are good. Because if you've got conflict in the board because people don't see eye to eye, maybe the finance director or the CEO is at odds with the non-executive directors. And I've had that particular instance where a group CFO very angrily told me, actually shouted at me, saying that I didn't understand about corporate governance and the independent non-executive directors were really just there to rubber stamp certain transactions, and that they were getting in the way of doing the business, which I found quite quite funny that you would have that. But obviously from an approach of financial side of things, maybe too many checks and balances, people could feel that it slows or delays matters. But the reality is, from what I've seen from personal experience, is that the finance director or the finance team, they're meant to be really there. If we look at the 3 lines of defense, they really are a second line of defense. So they are fulfilling a risk management role in that. So governance is actually meant to be helpful to them to ensure the safe and safeguard that revenues are properly recognized, that we do have properly evaluated our costs and expenses and those type of things. Hopefully that touches on the main areas that for your question.
Yeah, thanks. Rob, now that we've got these 10 quotients and we are sitting either as the company secretary or the SID or the chairman or one of the NEDs in this environment, how would you get them to respect and understand this as a framework and to get them on board in terms of trying to use it as a tool? What do you think are going to be challenges this assessment might face in boardrooms?
I think I've never carried out an assessment like this, so I've obviously read the text of the book, talking about the 5 quadrants and obviously quotients, sorry, and looking at how you've brought and developed that with the additional, and so I'd have to understand the methodology of how it's actually, not just in theory but in practice, would be implemented. But I think the number one thing would be that, all in the same way that governance is a journey and that there's no one size fits all, it's the same with boards, that no one size fits all, and there's sometimes a need for certain skill sets or competencies at certain times. So for instance, if we look at COVID-19, suddenly the whole area of resilience is high on the agenda, and the whole area of EQ is high on the agenda, because people are having to really consider how they are going to deal with the mental health, the mental well-being and the wellness of employees and fellow directors and the executive teams. And then also the SQ, the strategy side of things as well. Because strategy had been formed, business objectives had been formed, and then suddenly everything was cast to the ground, and then having to unite and, number one, firefight. So I would say, if I was trying to promote this to board members, I would say that it was a good starting tool to help individuals understand that there are different capacities and different capabilities that could be utilized, and that no one's expected to have the full remit of the 10 areas, and that people are individuals and they should try and keep their individualism, but at the same time understand where they have slightly stronger areas and other areas that need to be developed, and look at how to develop those weaknesses or areas of development.
There's one of the comments in the chat going back to language and how that can mean different things in different countries. There's a lovely South African saying called now, which equally, like just now, means not now. You would think now twice means it's going to be now, and it's not. And in the chamber, we ran an event yesterday, which was on energy and infrastructure development in the energy space in Africa. And the guy who was emceeing the event is one of the South African directors on the board. And he was asked something, and he said, "No, but." I thought, oh, you've been out the country for so long, and you still say no when you mean yes. And that's also a typical South African. Everything's no, and then you say all the yes stuff. So why did you say no? It's just one of those idiosyncrasies within the country. But there's your cultural mix. Anybody listening to him must have thought that was a bit of an odd. Even I jolted at it, and then realized, okay, I know what I've just heard. No problem, David, on the comment you've made. But there was a nice question. What is the difference between appetite quotient and transformation quotient? Is it behavior versus attitude? I think that is an element of it. Debbie, I think you asked the question. Also what it is appetite is the ability to open your mind to it and absorb it. Transformation is the journey from the appetite of absorbing it to getting to the other side. So your transformation is going having the resilience and strength and focus to actually go through the change. So part of transformation intelligence is, can I accept the change? Can I understand the change? Can I see what the value is of the change? And can I do it? The appetite definitely tags onto it, because some people just don't even have the appetite, least of all the journey. So the two definitely have a relationship. But as you've heard with a lot of the comments I'm making, these are all interrelated in very hugely in lots of ways. And to go back to Rob's comment, how would you do this? We got a assessment tool, and we would rank people. They would rank themselves on a 1 to 10 basis, with some guidance and some notes and some help so that they can understand what they're doing. They are not just choosing the nearest number because it sounds easy. So to give them the supporting ability to do it, and then for the map to plot out afterwards, that would then cover the collated board intelligence or the individual's intelligence. So I think, Angela, hopefully that adds, sort of brings in both the things that you were looking for, and there was the other question of Rob's as to how. You could do it in an Excel spreadsheet and then draw a spider diagram, or you could do it in a more complex tool and then get your diagram out. The advantage of doing something like what we've got, the online portal, is it's you can have it as unattributed, and you could say, okay, I now want to do all 8 of you, but I'm not going to show you all up as to which are your weak points and which are your strong points. We're going to look at the collective for the board. So if you've got 10 directors and you're all marked out of 10, therefore the result comes out of 100 and it's collated, that will give a single consolidated view of what the board is put together. So there's different ways in which you can keep it simple, or you can jizz it up a little bit. But the most important thing I'd like to just say there is, if you're going to use it, make sure that there is enough training in understanding and the meaning of what they're doing. So therefore, 5Q's book is written. I think I hear some sketching on paper that needs to be done, which we're going to have to get going on so that we can create the equivalent kind of content so that we've got the depth. Now, we've written an article on it, but we've kept that quite low level at the moment, just in bite-sized pieces. Should this be part of management training and staff development? And could you use this as a basis for staff appraisals? I think that's actually a very nice way of approaching people in the way they wouldn't have expected it, because you're looking at them as a person, not just looking at them as to whether they've delivered in the role, full stop. You haven't looked at them as a flat piece of paper. You've actually looked at them in the round, and you've looked at them as all their contributing points. And there are often so many people that give so much in the organization of their softer skills and are extremely valuable in the organization, who could be very challenged in a typical HR style review. What evidence do you have that this has return on investment and impacts the bottom line, engages clients and employees? If I had to answer that in the most direct way, this was by Debbie as well, I don't. What we do know is that if you are putting together a team that can work, that its diversities are bringing a combined strength, that their competencies, IQ, EQ, all of that is balanced, we know that that board is going to deliver in its engagement with the organization and with itself and its stakeholders in a more effective manner. Now, I'm sure that there is studies that the McKinseys of this world and Henley Business Schools of this world have done that give evidence that an effective board delivers the impact. So I would like to take it back a step and say, this is not direct. This is the knowledge to help you be the next, which will deliver the return on investment. So in isolation, it's not going to put another $1 million on the bottom line, but it is going to get you the right people in the boardroom working together effectively, and that team will work with the executive to deliver the bottom line.
I think as well that if we look at the aspects of boards and the complex issues that they have to deal with, and then the PQ, the political side of things. It's something I hadn't really. I know there's office politics and those type of things, and there's dynamics within the board, but the whole PQ thing is highly important. And by reading through the book and looking at that particular area, I realized that PQ is kind of, it's suggested in the book that EQ and PQ are very similar, in that EQ is more holistic, looking at yourself and looking at the social impact, whereas PQ is more focused on it's EQ with an agenda. So there's an actual agenda of what you're trying to achieve, and that's by way of networking or leveraging or creating that value proposition or the perception, and also the presentation of truth. And I think from that respect, you can't put an ROI on the actual this model by the looks of it. But the most successful companies should be able to work out complex issues, be able to readdress their strategic aspects, and also when they're bringing new board members in, maybe bring those skill sets or competencies in. So if there are gaps within the board, but you don't want 10 board members all with the same characteristics. One, they'll either all agree with each other, or they'll see each other's faults and which are their own faults, and they'll be equally annoyed and frustrated and angry with their peers, not because they're different, but because they're actually seeing themselves in those individuals and annoyed with their own shortcomings, though they may not necessarily identify that that's the reason. And that's why the EQ side is really important, very, very important, that you actually understand, why am I feeling this? Why am I made to feel this way? Should I feel this way? I know when I worked with a board from Tanzania, they, from one of the financial services companies, they had come across, and their chairman was asking various questions because we had touched on aspects of EQ, and it was something that they as a board had never really considered. And they said that the EQ was something they were going to take away, because when I was talking on IQ and EQ, IQ pretty much by the age of 25 or 27, the cognitive side of things has got to its limits. Now, obviously, we can still develop some of our skills, but the EQ, it's boundless. I mean, there's nothing to stop us from being able to understand body language, the words that are said, how they're said, but also the non-verbal prompts as well, getting to, and the intuition. I think that's very important, that people need to be aware that there's a right time to ask a question, and there's sometimes the right question but the wrong timing for answering it, and hopefully directors will understand that by a bit of coaching and guidance.
Just as a last statement, because we are up for time now and I don't want us to overrun, this I think is a very valuable tool for the nominations committee. Firstly, in setting up the spec of a new director, having looked at where the gaps are, what are they looking for in the individual? So there's the deep skill, and there's the IQ content that they need to be. They need to be a lawyer, or they need to be in the oil industry, or they need to have experience of working with the regulator. So you've got all those. But then you can look at this level and look at what kind of a person do you want, rather than what kind of a skill do you want. Do you want somebody who's going to come in and start banging his fist on the table? Or do you want somebody who's going to come in and not open their mouth? Yeah, you can get a lot of that kind of information from this assessment style. And as Case said earlier, it's irresponsible for boards not to be able to pick up on available ways of looking at their board to make it the best it can possibly be. So on that note, it has turned the moment of the half hour. I've picked up most of your questions, and there are some comments that we haven't covered. So yeah, we've got I think we've got through most of it. The one comment I'd just like to mention that was brought up by Keith is, and this is my drum that I always bang as hard as I can, a board is not effective until you've got the right chairman. So you need the right chairman, a balanced individual with these kind of skills, these quotients in a balanced way within the chair of a committee or of a board will mean that you can actually get the most out of the individuals, even if they've got low scores in certain areas, because they will have all the balance of the others to lead. And unfortunately, we often find chairs don't have a good balance in all of these. And EQ, unfortunately, often is the one that's missing. And that's why you often have the SID having a high EQ and the company secretary having a high EQ to balance the CEO and the chairman, who don't typically have the same degree of EQ if you take a normal balance. So there's a starting point of how to create it, because you want those drivers, you want those people who are going to push, you want them to have the vision and the strategy, which means they may not have some of the other stuff. That's fine. Bring it in with the other characters. I think I'm done, Keith. I don't know if anybody wants to stay on a few minutes and ask a few questions or have a conversation, but I think we're done with the formal roundtable.
If people want to ask questions verbally, it might be easier for more dialogue rather than just necessarily putting them into the chat. If there were some comments or observations they wanted to add, the floor is open.
Debbie's made a nice comment on diversity, but more important, inclusion. I saw a board bring in diversity, a woman who was specialized in the customer, and this was a bank, and they'd never had anybody who focused on the customer ever. They appointed the diversity and shunned it. They didn't include it. There was no inclusivity at all, to the point they almost lost the individual because they had excluded her so dramatically. And she was gender and experience and her specialism. And they just said, you don't have banking experience, therefore why are you here? We're not listening. We're not absolutely excluded. I've never seen anything so awful in my life. So very valid comment.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I'll close the door.
Well, I think it's been a fantastic presentation, and I've learned a lot and come away quite enthused about all the things I've heard this morning, and all the comments from everyone else. So thank you both so much. You obviously know the subject inside out, and you're obviously of a huge value to us and everyone else. But it's probably great that we draw it to a close. I know with these breakfast briefings, everyone's got to get off to other meetings. But if anyone does have further comments, if they could send them to the clerk or the executive assistant, we'll collate them and let them, Sharon and Rob, have them, and perhaps we can come back to some of them at a later presentation.
Maybe what I can offer, Keith, is the article I've written on the 10 Qs, which gives a little bit of insight, which is basically what I've covered today. And Karen can attach that in the follow-up email that comes back to you. And then the book of Kakabatsi, if you're interested, it's quite a short read. It is available on Amazon.
Yep. Excellent.
Which
Well done. Thank you.
In more detail. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Then. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.